Ahead of next month's budget, there's also a fierce debate that is underway now here in India about whether the country's super rich should pay more taxes. The debate began after the Prime Minister's economic advisor, Mr. C. Rangarajan, recently said that the budget could look at imposing a surcharge on income that's above a certain threshold. But India Inc. has complained strongly to the Finance Minister, saying that this is a bad move, it'll hamper growth.
Our recommendations from FICCI were that the tax structures be left unchanged.
When you raise rates of taxes, it acts against growth.
There should be no new additional taxes considered in view of the turn in sentiment, which is now cautiously optimistic.
Growth orientation will lead to much higher tax collections than merely raising rates of taxes.
We are on the verge of making a very major investment, but we are held up by an uncertain regulatory regime.
Well, our panel continues to stay with us, but first I'd just like to play out a short interview I did earlier this evening with Adi Godrej, the president of CII, who was there at that meeting with the Finance Minister yesterday, where India Inc. raised many concerns. Mr. Godrej, what exactly are your concerns about raising taxes on high-income individuals?
Well, our experience has always been when rates of taxes have been high, collections have been low, and vice versa. A high rate of taxes does not lead to higher collections. In fact, various factors come to play where collections might be negatively affected. So having a high rate of tax is a retrograde step.
But when you raised these concerns with Mr. Chidambaram yesterday, what did he say to you?
No, he was just there to listen to us, and of course he was accompanied by all the various secretaries in the ministry, as also the Commerce Secretary and Industry Secretary, and we were very explicit in saying that higher rates of taxes on anything, whether it is estate duty, inheritance tax or income tax, would create a very negative sentiment and perhaps go against the requirements for higher growth rates and may even lead to lower collections and not higher collections.
But do you agree with the assessment of Naina Lal Kidwai, who was with you in that meeting yesterday, that a move like this could lead to professionals relocating to more tax-friendly countries, that this could be one of the fallouts of a decision like this?
Yeah, all sorts of negative effects could take place. Some of them we may not even be able to envisage it right now. When we had high rates of taxes going up to 90% in the past, our economy was crawling and growth rate was not more than 2 or 3%. We must learn from experience. This does not work. Even if you look at all the developing countries, if you combine the corporate tax rates and the individual tax rates, we are one of the highest. So I don't think it makes sense at all to increase the marginal rates of income tax in India.
But Mr. Godrej, others would argue that if you look at the tax rates in other countries, in some of them they are much higher. In India you have that upper slab of 30%, but you don't look at France, it's talking about 75%.
But we should certainly not compare ourselves with developed countries whose targeted growth rates are 2 and 3%. Our economics are extremely different. We need higher savings rate, higher investment rates than they do. And to compare with developed countries would be totally irrelevant and would lead us to their kind of growth rates. Surely if we want France's growth rate, which is barely 1%, or the United States, which is 2%, then we should follow them. We have to grow at 8 to 9%, and we should do what other developing countries are doing, not what developed countries are doing.
One final question, Mr. Godrej. Would you then say that the idea really should be to widen the tax base, because there is a huge population in this country that doesn't pay taxes or just misrepresents how much money they make?
That's a very important point. We must expand the tax base, and one of the problems is first-time taxpayers hesitate to get into the tax net because they are worried they will be questioned about previous years. In fact, we discussed with the Finance Minister, and we have suggested to him that some mechanism should be devised whereby first-time taxpayers are not harassed about previous years. If that happens, we expect a very large number of people will enter the tax net, and their taxes would add to the kitty in the future.
All right, Mr. Godrej, thank you for speaking to us tonight. And so let's get straight to our debate this evening.